Hello, and welcome to the Kathleen Spracklin podcast. I am a woman on a mission to establish a cadre of writers, thinkers, and teachers who are transforming the world, one character at a time. And it all starts with one thing, a deep understanding of human motivation, why people do what they do, and the forces that drive them. To gain that understanding, I am mining the intersection of psychology, theology, and philosophy to make you a better writer. This is episode 121, and the title is Making Something Out of Your Zettelkasten. Tamara, this episode is for you. Tamara commented on one of my videos and was talking about how she had been keeping Zettelkasten for over a year, but it was primarily just functioning as a knowledge hub. And she wasn't seeing the idea of something coming out of the Zettelkasten. Scott Shepper often talks about a Zettelkasten will make you a writing machine. And she hadn't experienced any of that. So I asked her to check on one of two possibilities, or maybe both, because there are a couple of things that can cause that as a situation. One of which is if you are putting light cards, if you're not letting cards interact. If you read a book and all the cards from that book are in one place, and then you read another book and those cards are all over here, and you're not letting ideas interact, that would be if you are filing in a manner other than using your index. That could be a problem because that interaction is what explodes into ideas. And the other possible problem I mentioned to her was, were you putting some of your own self on every card? Because when you file those cards away, you're filing your thoughts. And if don't have them recorded, then when you bring the next thought together with it, you're not interacting your thoughts. You're just interacting pieces of information, which if you think about it, that's fine. But now you've got one thought of yours, the thought you thought about looking at these two cards. You have to have interaction of two thoughts before you get the explosion. So, however, there is a more general question that is pretty exciting, because I did find that the Zettelkasten potentially makes you a writing machine, because those ideas can be so compelling that you just feel like you need to share them with the world. And like you can't hold them in, you can't keep them just to yourself. So in that sense, yes, it can really motivate you. And if you have something specific that you want to write, it can sure help you crystallize it, organize it, put your research together. But I wanted to share a little bit of a story, because from the first few cards in my Zettelkasten, I was already getting connections that were just popping my brain and ideas for writing. I could have written an article. It would have taken more research. I identified gaps, but I had the outline of an article when I had fewer than 10 cards, literally, in my Zettelkasten. Now, my first Zettelkasten, my guru was Scott Shepper, and this book, Getting Started with an Annette Zettelkasten, was not really in book form at the time. He had a website where you could get some instructions on how to start. But the interesting thing is that the cards that he has you make are the same as the ones that were on the website. And so it was that the first genuine main card that I ever created for my Zettelkasten was this card, which was a quote from Luhmann. And it's about the concept of you can't really have communication between two people or two entities unless there's a potential of surprise. That's kind of the point of the quote that he's making. Well, that was rather interesting for me, because another very early card for me was a card that I had made to assist me in studying Spanish. Now, I've studied Spanish for about 9 years, and I think after about 9 years of study, I could probably order from a restaurant, and I might be able to survive in a few basic communications, but I'm not brilliant in that regard. But there was a very cute example that I captured for a Zettelkasten card. And this was where you're going to learn the Spanish verb caber, to fit. And if you can see it, there's a bear who doesn't really quite fit in a taxi cab. Caber, cab, bear, caber, fit, to fit. And that was a rather cute one. But what it ties to is the element of surprise. So now, if I've got that Lumen quote, and this is my new card, and I have next to nothing in my Zettelkasten, where's this card going to go? It's going to go right next to the Lumen card. So that was rather interesting. So now I've got communication and language. And that made me wonder, to what extent does surprise have to do with when you're trying to learn a language? Is it a friend or a foe? And it can be a friend if it's helping you to memorize a card, but it can also be a foe if there's too much and you can't make sense of it. Well, that led on to another card on jokes, the concept of jokes. And before long, I was able to create a card that really tempted me to actually produce an article. I had outlined a few gaps and a thesis just from the excitement that was being generated by the fact that these cards from disparate sources were all suddenly clicking and relating to the same topic because they all had a tie into surprise. Another one was from a nephew of mine. My niece posted on Facebook when her son was reading a book, and he was saying to Mom, "Mom, is A takeaway a good grade?" She's confused, A takeaway? Finally, she walks over to see what he's looking at. It's A minus. And that dawned on me that in a language, we have so many elements that are so precise. And if you don't get them exactly precisely correct, you haven't made the communication. You can't say, you can say 4 take away 2 is 2, or you could say 4 minus 2 is 2, but you can't call a grade a takeaway and communicate. And that really struck me as another aspect, the required provision. To me, that was surprising, and also by the fact that it was a humorous element to language learning. So they ended up together. And so the end result was that literally before I even had 10 cards in my system, already I was thinking about what could be written, what could be produced. And I knew that with a certain amount of research, directed research, I could put together an article on the role of surprise in language learning. And so that when it comes to making something out of your Zettelkasten, the thing that comes out of your Zettelkasten is the marriage of two ideas in surprisingly different fields that turn out to have a fascinating connection. And in that connection, ideas explode. And to me, that is the power of the Zettelkasten. So my advice tomorrow is play with your cards, put them together, try surprising connections. When you go to your index to make your connection, try making a far-fetched connection. That it ties to your index, try making one that's far-fetched. That's provocative. And let those cards play together a little bit. If it's an area that's interesting to you, that should kind of create fresh ideas in your mind. So that's what I wanted to share tonight. And thank you for your question, Tamara. I appreciate it. Good night.